Ciao ragazzi, siamo qui con Hansi e André dei Blind Guardian per parlarci del loro nuovo album Beyond the Red Mirror. Hi guys!
Hey.
Let's start with the first question. The story of Beyond the Red Mirror starts 20 years ago with Imagination from the Other Side. Would you please tell us a summary of the entire story, the first and this album?
Okay, the first one is told fairly quickly. On Imagination there are particularly two songs, Bright Eyes and The Story Ends, telling a story of a boy who's living in a world similar to ours, and he's living there in total isolation, but he is supposed to be the chosen one for another world. And on Imaginations we find this boy standing in front of a mirror about to jump into this other world. And that's where we leave him with the album. And 20 years later I revisited that particular place and I just thought, well, I could finish up the story and start brainstorming what could have happened to the boy. And since it is a weird story, I decided that the boy decided not to jump and stayed in his world instead. And due to the decision, there were fatal consequences for both worlds. And this is basically documented on the new album. And we will join the boy, who has become a man by then, 20 years later obviously, on his quest to find the red mirror. And he obviously is facing a lot of problems, and we also find out a lot about the two worlds described first in Imaginations, but especially on the new album.
Yes, the second question was if there are past actually 20 years between the first album and that one. So you almost answered that question.
But I have to clarify a little bit, because time plays an important role in the story. First we have to understand that time is a living creature within the story. It controls time, but it's also called time, and has an influence on the story. And time is a tricky beast, in general. In the world which is similar to our world, 20 years are 20 years, so the boy actually is something like 32, 33, whatever. In the other world, eons and millions of years have passed in between this 20 years, so time is just defined different.
Why you decided to create a sequel after so many years?
That's based on the music. There were two different kind of things coming to my attention when we composed the first few songs. One was more a sort of disturbing element in the music, which was kind of futuristic, and the other one was very organic and classical. So we have had these two different types of songs on the album, and that stayed up to the very end. We have one section which is classic and the other one which is fairly modern, futuristic. And therefore I started thinking, well, if there are connections like this in the music, why not coming up with a concept? And I immediately figured, since there are two words in the music, I need two words in the storyboard as well to give justice to the different sounding of the songs. And then at a certain point I just revisited Imaginations and found that story, which was a good starting point to come up with new stories. This is a little influenced by a story written by Stephen King, which is called Dr. Sleep, and he did the same technique. He took the boy from Shining and revisited him again 30 years later, whatever, and tells a story, when this boy has become a grown-up man. And I thought, well, that's a good idea, and this is how I came up with the intention to revisit my boy and deliver another story about him.
How did the collaboration between the Blind Guardian and the three different chorals in Prague, Budapest and Boston start?
That was partly accidental, because we needed one choir which would have been really big, like 200 people. We have that intro sequence in a song called The Ninth Wave, and that demanded a huge choir, and we were not able to find a 200 people choir who would be trustful enough to deliver the quality we wanted, because we have had something Verdi, Carmina Burana like in mind. and therefore it was necessary to have that amount of people. And since we couldn't get it with one choir, we just took 3 different choirs to, you know, get the momentum.
And what about the orchestras?
The orchestras, we were used to work with big orchestras, like 90 people. We did that on At the Edge of Time. When we did this album, we started with the same orchestra we used to work on in the past, but when we were facing timing problems in terms of the schedule, we just realized that the Czech people with whom we usually work would not be available in the month we needed them. So we were in urge for a different orchestra, and we luckily found that in Budapest. So the 90 people orchestras play at different spots on the album.
Most of your albums have songs inspired from fantasy books. For example, in At the Edge of Time, we have War of Thrones, inspired by a song of Ice and Fire. Did you pick inspiration from any fantasy books to create the new story?
No. It's a fantasy story, and there are many links to sci-fi, to religion, to history, mythological elements in general. I tried to combine these elements, and of course it is inspired by what I've read in the past, but there's no particular story I would say, well, this is the one, you know, I wanted to introduce here, and they are not linked to the individual songs. They all tell the story of the concept.
We have a wonderful 90 minutes opening, there is Ninth Wave. Tell us something about this great song that we actually really like it.
I'm happy to hear that.
We tried out many things with down-tuned guitars this time, and the outcome was a real futuristic-like, soundtrack-like song that we liked very much, and we put in lots of ideas like this intro, and we were building up, and in the end we had this awesome, huge introduction. For me, it's the song that brings the most innovation in this album and brings the most surprises, because I think even if you know Blind Guardian and followed us the last 25 years, you will not expect something like this. But I'm sure that most people will like it. So it's nice to have something like such a positive surprise for the people.
Like the first one, we have an amazing last song, a Grand Parade, and it's an explosion of sounds and happiness music. Can you spoiler us the end of the story, or just tell us about something about the composition, about this great song?
Well, the music will be described by André. I'm just going to tell a little bit about the story. It's not the end of the story. I don't like that. There are surprises, and things turn out different than expected in the beginning, and the boy will get lost at a certain point again, but I'm sure I will meet him later on again. An earbook version with an additional song which is defining a sort of sequel already. The song is called Doom, and he describes what happened after Grand Parade. Grand Parade is telling us a lot about the events at the Red Mirror.
Would you like to tell us your personal consideration about your album that no one ever asked you, but you really would like to share with your fans?
Oh, that's a question, you know, we never think about. For us, it's, you know, music is an element of our life. It's a natural source. You know, we just spread it by, you know, by creativity, by coincidence, by, you know, the urge, the inner urge to deliver music. But I don't think about any particular question anyone could ask me about it, or, you know, which I would like to deliver, because the most important thing about the music, and this goes even over the lyrics, is the music itself. It has to define everything, and it has to catch the emotion of the people, and has to, you know, create a certain sensation in people. And whatever people do with it then, with the music and the lyrics, is up to them completely.
Okay, thank you very much
Thank you.
for your time. We can't wait to see you in Milan and in Rome this next year.
It will be a blast.
Okay, goodbye.
Thank you.